You know, when you think about a group of people sitting in a circle.
Like a therapy group.
Right, yeah, like a therapy group, or honestly, even just, a boardroom at work or family sitting around a dining table, there's this illusion that what you see is exactly what you get.
Yeah, you just see people talking.
Exactly. It looks
Yeah.
entirely organic, almost like random, right? But if you were to put on a pair of like psychological X-ray glasses, you wouldn't see a random gathering at all.
You really wouldn't?
You would see this highly structured, almost architectural blueprint just, unfolding right in front of you.
It's very much like looking at a flock face versus opening up the back to see the gears.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, because the surface looks so simple.
Hmm.
But underneath, there's this really complex, predictable machinery that's governing, well, basically every single interaction in the room.
Right.
We assume human gatherings are just spontaneous, but they are actually bound by all these invisible forces,
Yeah.
predictable stages and really deep-seated psychological mechanisms.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today we are looking at basically the ultimate instruction manual for those invisible gears.
We really are.
We're focusing on the fascinating, highly structured life cycle of group counseling. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because our sources today, they're blending the absolute gold standard clinical manuals of therapeutic group work.
The heavy hitters.
Yeah, the heavy hitters. We're integrating the comprehensive 6-stage framework from Gerald Corey, some really deep existential insights from Irvin Yalom, the 5-stage models from Ivy and Peterson, and even some gritty, highly practical guidelines from substance abuse treatment manuals.
And, these frameworks, they serve as the bedrock for mental health professionals.
Oh, right.
They're specifically designed to teach therapists how to manage, guide, and ultimately, heal a room full of really complex, struggling individuals.
And this is the key thing for you listening, you don't need to be a clinical psychologist to benefit from this.
Not at all.
That's why we're bringing these specific sources to you today. These texts are secretly a masterclass in human dynamics.
They really are cheat codes.
Yes, cheat codes to human interaction, whether you're, navigating a new project team at work, or trying to understand a shifting family dynamic, or if you're just inherently curious about how human beings actually change. Understanding these stages reveals everything.
Because we're going to explore the entire life cycle of a group today. From the meticulous pre-group planning, through the anxious beginnings, the stormy transitions.
We definitely all know the stormy transitions.
Right. Into the deep engine of actual therapeutic work. And finally, that really profound process of saying goodbye.
So let's just jump right in, because groups, as the texts point out, they don't just happen.
No, they are carefully engineered crucibles for change.
Crucibles, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, you cannot simply put 12 people in a room, shut the door, and expect healing to just spontaneously occur.
Which is probably what a lot of people think group therapy is, just a bunch of chairs and talking.
Exactly. And in fact, the sources are clear that if you just throw people together without structure, you are far more likely to cause psychological damage than you are to facilitate any kind of growth.
Wow. Damn it.
Oh, yeah. That's why the architecture is so vital.
Which brings us to the very beginning, the architectural phase. Before a group can act as an engine for personal transformation, it has to be built.
Right. The pre-group issues.
Yeah, the formation phase. Corey outlines this as the stage that happens, long before anyone actually sits in a circle.
And this pre-group phase requires rigorous planning. A leader has to draft a really clear proposal.
Like a business plan for therapy.
Pretty much. They have to define the goals of the group, establish the demographic, figure out the logistics of, how often they'll meet, and determine the theoretical orientation they're going to use.
But the single most critical element of this entire phase, the make or break mechanism, really is the screening process.
The screening is everything.
And I want to challenge this screening process a bit based on what the sources say, because when I was reading Yalom's criteria for who gets into a group and who gets excluded, it really raised an eyebrow for me.
Really? How so?
Well, Yalom says good candidates are highly motivated, they have a capacity for empathy, and they define their problems as interpersonal.
Right.
But on the flip side, poor candidates include people who are actively psychotic, highly suspicious, sociopathic, or in a state of extreme crisis.
Yes, those are standard exclusion criteria.
But to a layperson, that sounds like a velvet rope at an exclusive nightclub. Like, our therapists just curating an elite, manageable club of quote-unquote good patients to make their own jobs easier while leaving the really tough cases out in the cold?
It does sound exclusionary when you frame it that way, and honestly, it's a very common ethical question. But screening is not about convenience for the therapist at all.
Okay, what is it about then?
It is fundamentally about harm reduction. The guiding question the leader has to ask during screening is not, will this person be easy to manage?
Right.
Right. The question is, will this group be productive or counterproductive for this individual? And equally important, will this individual's presence be productive or counterproductive for the group?
Ah, okay, so it's a dual protection. You're protecting the individual from the group, and you're protecting the group from the individual.
Precisely that. Let's break down the mechanics of why. Group therapy is an incredibly intense environment.
I can imagine.
People are going to challenge each other. They're going to give unvarnished feedback. Now, if someone is in an active state of psychosis, or if they're in the middle of an acute, shattering life crisis where they're just incredibly fragile.
Throwing them into a room where their defenses get systematically dismantled?
Exactly. It could actually cause a severe psychological break. They require individual therapy or stabilization first. It's not safe for them.
Okay, that makes total sense for the fragile individual. But what about protecting the group? Like, what happens if you let someone with sociopathic traits pass that velvet rope?
Well, trust is the only currency a therapeutic group has. If a leader includes someone who lacks empathy, or someone who is highly suspicious and prone to, manipulating others for their own gratification, that individual will exploit the vulnerability of the other members.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about it. Once a member shares a deep, shameful secret, and another member uses it against them or mocks them, the psychological safety of the entire room shatters.
The crucible cracks.
The crucible cracks.
Grr.
The other members will immediately raise their defenses, and the group will never, ever reach a productive stage. So screening out those individuals is really an act of preserving the healing environment for everyone else.
So it's not a judgment on their inherent worth as a person.
Not at all.
It's a clinical judgment on their readiness for this specific, highly volatile type of environment.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's assume the screening is done, the members are selected, the container is built. We now move into the initial stage.
The first meeting.
Yeah, where the group actually meets for the first time. And looking at the characteristics of this stage across Corey, Yalom, and Ivy and Peterson, the universal theme seems to be sheer, unadulterated anxiety.
Oh, the anxiety in the room during a first session is incredibly dense. You can cut it with a knife. Both Corey and Yalom emphasize that the primary psychological tasks for the members here are inclusion and identity.
Right.
Yalom frames it brilliantly, actually. He says the core, often completely subconscious question every single member is asking themselves as they scan the room is, am I in or out?
Figuring out if you belong.
Exactly.
Corey talks about this concept of the public image. During these early sessions, members are terrified of rejection, so they present only the socially acceptable, polished, two-dimensional versions of themselves.
Yeah, that public image is a massive defense mechanism. Anxiety and insecurity are at their peak because the environment is novel. The social rules are completely ambiguous.
Nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Right. Members are tentative. They are constantly testing the limits, just trying to decipher the unspoken norms. They look to the leader for direction. Constantly.
Like looking to a parent.
Exactly like that.
Yes.
Seeking a kind of parental reassurance that they are safe and that they are doing therapy right.
You see this dynamic everywhere in life, though.
Oh, absolutely.
It's exactly like the first day at a new job, or a first date, or even just the first 10 minutes of a dinner party with people you don't know well.
Right. You're on your best behavior.
Yeah, you are sitting there carefully managing your brand. You're calculating, like, will these people accept me? How much of my actual messy, flawed self do I want to reveal right now? What happens if I say the wrong thing?
You are entirely focused on curating a safe persona.
And this is where the leader's functions become incredibly delicate, right? Because if the leader doesn't manage this initial stage correctly, the group never gets past that curated public image.
The texts are very clear on the skills required here. The leader must actively model the behavior they want to see.
So they have to show honesty, spontaneous reaction, empathy.
Yes, but they also have to strike a very specific balance when it comes to structure.
What happens if they get the structure wrong? Let's say a leader comes in and dictates every single minute of the session, like a strict teacher handing out a syllabus. We're going to do this for 5 minutes, then this.
Well, if the leader is too authoritarian, providing too much structure, the members just become entirely dependent on them.
They just sit back.
Yeah, they will just wait to be told what to do, what to talk about, and even how to feel. They won't take any ownership of their own therapeutic process.
And on the flip side,
On the other hand, if the leader provides zero structure, if they just walk in, sit in silence, and wait for the group to organically start sharing their deepest traumas, the anxiety in the room will skyrocket to intolerable levels.
people would just freeze.
They'll panic. They will feel completely adrift, and they will likely drop out of the group altogether.
So the art is providing just enough structure to lower the anxiety so people can function, but leaving enough ambiguity that the members have to step up and start interacting with each other.
That is the exact tension a skilled leader maintains. And, within this stage, they also have to explicitly establish the ground rules,
Right, the non-negotiables.
the most non-negotiable of which is confidentiality. If the members do not believe that what they say will stay in that room, the public image will remain firmly in place forever. Nobody will share anything real.
The outline also specifically mentions the mechanics of beginning a session, particularly in these early stages. How does the therapist actually kick off that very first meeting when 12 strangers are just staring at them?
Beginning a session is a distinct skill. The leader doesn't just say, go.
Right. Okay, spill your trauma.
Exactly. That wouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
They might start with a brief check-in. They might ask each member to rate their anxiety from 1 to 10, or ask what they hope to get out of the next 90 minutes.
It's about gently bringing everyone's focus into the present moment.
Yes, and establishing a ritual. Rituals lower anxiety.
Okay, so they build the container. The rituals are in place. Everyone knows the rules. They've politely introduced their public images to one another. The honeymoon is in full swing.
A polite phase.
But, as we know, a polite honeymoon phase cannot generate deep psychological change. Politeness is a superficial piece.
It's just surface level.
Right. If we want to get to real vulnerability, the politeness has to fracture. And that shift is exactly what happens next. We move from the initial stage into what Corey calls the transition stage.
Ah, yes. The storm. The transition stage is often characterized by resistance, defensiveness, and outright conflict.
It gets messy.
Very. Because if the first stage was about inclusion figuring out in or out, Yellum notes that this stage is fundamentally about power and control. The primary question shifts from in or out to top or bottom.
Top or bottom. Okay, I was trying to think of a real-world equivalent for this transition, and it feels exactly like moving in with a close friend.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. The first week is pure honeymoon. It's all aggressive politeness. Oh, you left your dishes in the sink? No problem at all. I love washing dishes. I'll take care of it.
You're trying to be the perfect roommate.
Exactly. But by week 3, the public image is exhausted. The energy required to maintain that facade just runs out.
You can't keep it up.
You can't. And suddenly you are fiercely arguing about those dishes and the thermostat and who takes out the trash. It feels like the relationship is breaking down, but it's actually a necessary friction to establish how the relationship will function in reality.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism at play. The friction is a feature of the process. It's not a bug.
Right.
In a therapy group, this struggle for control manifests as a social pecking order emerging. Members start testing boundaries. They might start complaining about the structure of the group, or they might arrive late.
Passive-aggressive stuff?
Yeah. They might argue with an interpretation the therapist makes, or they might even start subtly attacking each other.
The sources refer to this as dealing with problem members or dealing with resistance. But it seems like calling it resistance almost blames the client when it's actually just a natural human defense mechanism kicking in because they are scared of getting closer.
That is a really crucial reframing. Because skilled therapists, they don't view resistance as the client being stubborn or malicious.
They don't take it personally.
Right. They view it as the client protecting themselves. Because as the intimacy in the room increases, the fear of exposure increases. So they push back. And the primary target for that pushback is almost always the group leader.
Why the leader, though? Why not just fight with the guy sitting next to you?
Because the members need to test the leader's trustworthiness before they hand over their deepest vulnerabilities.
Oh, I see.
They're subconsciously running a stress test. They want to know, will this leader crumble under a challenge? Are they strong enough to hold my anger, my darkness, my messy emotions?
Can they handle me?
Yes. Can they handle conflict without getting defensive or retaliating or abandoning me?
So by attacking the leader, they're actually asking, are you safe enough for me to fall apart in front of?
Exactly. And this dynamic introduces two of the most profound concepts in psychology, which are heavily emphasized in both Corey's and Yellum's frameworks: transference and countertransference.
Okay, let's really dig into these because understanding this changes how you view every argument you've ever had.
It really does.
Let's start with transference. How do the sources define it in a group setting?
Transference occurs when a group member unknowingly projects feelings, attitudes, or desires that they hold towards significant figures from their past, usually authority figures or parents, onto the group leader, or sometimes even onto other members.
The best way I can visualize this is the mask analogy.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so if I grew up with a hypercritical, demanding father, I walk into the group carrying a mask of my father's face. Without realizing it, I place that mask over the therapist's face.
Yep.
Now, no matter what the therapist actually says, I only hear my father's voice. If the therapist asks a totally neutral question like, how did your week go? I process it through the mask. I hear a criticism. I hear, why didn't you achieve more this week?
That is exactly how the mechanism operates. And because you perceive a criticism, you react to the therapist as if they are your critical father.
So I get defensive.
Right. You might become highly rebellious and argumentative. Or, on the flip side, you might become incredibly submissive, desperately seeking their approval. The leader hasn't actually done anything to warrant this reaction. They are merely a blank screen onto which you are projecting your unresolved historical trauma.
And what's fascinating is that in the real world, this destroys relationships.
Well, look on.
If I put my father's mask on my boss, I might get fired for being insubordinate. If I put it on my spouse, we end up in these endless, confusing arguments where my spouse is saying, why are you reacting like I just attacked you? I just asked what's for dinner.
Exactly. But in the group, this isn't a failure. It's the actual material you were there to work on.
It's the grist for the mill.
Yes. The group provides a contained environment where that transference can be gently exposed and examined. The therapist can say, I noticed you became very angry when I asked about your week. Can we explore what you heard me say?
Wow, that's powerful.
But navigating that requires the therapist to be incredibly grounded. Because if the therapist isn't careful, they fall into the trap of countertransference.
Right, the other side of the coin. Countertransference is when the leader's own unresolved issues get triggered by the members. Because therapists are human. They have their own masks, their own blind spots, and their own childhoods.
It is the single biggest pitfall for any group leader. Let's take your example. You are transferring your father issues onto the leader, and you are acting out. You are being rebellious, challenging their authority, trying to provoke them.
Right, I'm pesting them.
Now, let's say the leader has an unresolved need to be universally liked. Or they have a deep-seated fear of conflict stemming from their own chaotic upbringing.
So my trauma just bumped directly into their trauma. What does the leader's countertransference look like in that moment?
Well, when you challenge them, instead of recognizing your behavior as transference and exploring it clinically, the leader gets personally triggered. They feel genuinely attacked.
They take the bait.
They take the bait. They might become defensive and argue back, trying to prove they're a good therapist. Or they might subtly punish you by ignoring you for the rest of the session. Or they might completely cave in, apologize profusely, and just lose control of the group's boundaries altogether.
And if the leader does that, what happens to the group?
The group stalls permanently. The trust is completely broken.
Oh.
You, the client, have your worst fears confirmed, that authority figures are either tyrannical or weak.
Wow.
And the other members watch the leader lose control and realize the container is not safe. This is why the sources are absolutely emphatic that leaders must continuously monitor their own internal reactions.
They have to police themselves.
Right. They are ethically mandated to seek their own supervision or personal therapy. If a leader cannot recognize and manage their own countertransference, they will breed hostility, and the group will remain trapped in the transition stage forever.
Which brings this right back to you, the listener, and how we operate in our everyday lives. How often do we avoid conflict because we think fighting means a relationship is failing?
We think the storm is inherently bad.
Right. But what this transition stage teaches us is that learning to respectfully navigate conflict, learning to survive the storm without running away or retaliating, is the only way to build authentic trust.
It's the only way through.
If a group, whether that's a marriage, a friendship, or a corporate team, suppresses all conflict, they remain superficial. They stay stuck in the polite public image phase and never actually reach a state of true collaboration.
The transition stage is a necessary trial by fire. And if you can survive it, if the leader handles the resistance and the transference skillfully, the reward is immense. The group moves into section 3, the working stage.
The promised land.
This is where you achieve what the texts call high cohesion.
Cohesion is the glue. It's the engine of change. When you read the characteristics of the working stage, it sounds like a totally different room.
The atmosphere completely shifts.
The defensiveness drops. Communication is open, direct, and incredibly honest. Members aren't constantly looking to the leader for permission to speak anymore. They are interacting directly with each other.
They finally feel supported enough to drop the public image entirely and risk trying out new vulnerable behaviors.
The hallmark of the working stage is a profound shift in focus. In the early stages, members primarily engage in what we call there and then communication.
Right, giving historical reports.
Right? They tell stories about their past, they complain about their spouses, they recount a frustrating interaction with a coworker. Let me tell you what happened to me at the grocery store on Tuesday.
And that's safe, because it's already over. The other members can only react to the story, they can't react to the reality.
Exactly. But in the working stage, the focus shifts to the here and now. Members stop just telling stories about the outside world, and they start dealing directly with what is happening in the room between each other in real time.
And this is where the true therapeutic power lies.
I want to make sure we clearly distinguish this, because the substance abuse texts we reviewed place a massive emphasis on this shift, framing it as the difference between content and process.
Oh, this is essential.
Can we explore how a therapist actually uses that distinction to drive the here and now?
Understanding the difference between content and process is basically the master skill of group facilitation. Content is the what. It is the literal words being spoken, the narrative of the story. Process is the how.
Okay, the how.
It is the interpersonal dynamics, the body language, the emotional undercurrents happening while the content is being discussed.
So let's play this out. Let's say a member, John, is talking about his marriage. He says, I really love my wife, and I want things to work out, but she says I'm emotionally closed off.
Okay, that's the content.
Right. But while he is saying it, John is staring at the floor, his arms are tightly crossed, his jaw is clenched, and he is speaking in a flat, monotone voice.
And that is the process.
Yes.
And the process usually reveals way more truth than the content. To take it a step further into interpersonal process, while John is speaking, the therapist is watching the room. Who in the group is interrupting him?
Right.
Who always rushes in to hand him a tissue the second he looks sad, thereby shutting down his emotional expression? Who rolls their eyes? The therapist's job is to illuminate that process.
So instead of the therapist giving John marriage advice based on the content of his story, which is what a friend might do, what does the therapist do with the process?
The therapist brings it into the here and now. They might say, John, as you talk about wanting to be emotionally open with your wife, I notice you are physically closing yourself off from us right now, looking at the floor with your arms crossed. What are you experiencing in this room, in this moment, as you share this? Or they might turn to the group and say, I noticed that whenever John brings up his marriage, Sarah, you immediately change the subject. What is happening between the two of you?
That is incredibly immediate. You take the abstract problem, I'm emotionally closed off, and you make it a live, interactive experiment right there in the chairs.
You can't hide behind a story anymore.
But surely this level of intensity isn't a guaranteed destination. Does every group actually reach this highly productive working stage?
Drawing directly from Corey's text, the answer is a definitive no. Reaching the working stage is an achievement, it's not an inevitability. Many groups get permanently stuck in the transition stage, endlessly fighting over structure and power.
What are the common traps that prevent a group from reaching cohesion?
A major structural issue is changing membership. If a group is open, meaning new people are constantly joining and old people are leaving, the group continuously has to reset.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, every time a new person enters, the group reverts back to the initial stage to figure out in or out, and they have to re-navigate the transition stage all over again. They never build enough sustained trust to reach deep work.
You can't build a house if you keep swapping out the foundation blocks every week.
Exactly. Another massive trap is a culture of advice giving. This is incredibly common in groups that lack a highly skilled leader. A member shares a deep vulnerability, and because the other members are uncomfortable with the emotional weight, they immediately jump in to fix the problem.
Right. They offer practical advice. Have you tried talking to HR? Or you should really read this self-help book.
Which sounds helpful on the surface.
Yeah.
They are trying to be supportive.
But is it?
Psychologically, it is dismissive. It completely shuts down the emotional exploration. The member didn't share their pain to get a logistical checklist. They shared it to feel understood.
Right.
When a group relies on advice giving, it keeps the interactions entirely on the cognitive level. It remains superficial. They never drop into the emotional depth required for the working stage.
The desire to fix the problem actually prevents the person from healing.
It does.
But when a group does avoid those traps and reaches the working stage, it becomes an incredibly powerful engine for change. And this is where Irvin Yalom's work really shines. He outlines 11 therapeutic factors, the actual mechanisms that cause people to heal in a group setting.
Yes, the therapeutic factors are brilliant.
Let's break down how a few of these actually work in practice, starting with universality.
Universality is often the first profound relief a group member experiences.
Yeah.
Many people enter therapy secretly convinced that their pain, their intrusive thoughts, or their specific relational failures are entirely unique to them.
They think they're the only one.
Yes, they carry this immense burden of shame, believing they are fundamentally broken in a way no one else is. They feel totally isolated.
And then they sit in a circle. They take a massive risk and tentatively share their deepest, darkest secret. Maybe it's an addiction or a shameful thought they had about their child, or just a deep sense of worthlessness, and they look up expecting to be ostracized.
And instead, they see 3 other people nodding in recognition.
Oh, man.
The relief of that moment cannot be overstated. The realization of, I am not alone, and my darkest secret is actually a shared human experience, is a healing factor all on its own. It shatters the isolation and neutralizes the shame.
It's the power of me too.
Exactly.
Another crucial factor Yalom identifies is the installation of hope. And this isn't just the therapist saying, hang in there, things will get better. It's much more tangible than that.
It has to be tangible. In a group, members are at different stages of their journey. A new member who is completely paralyzed by severe depression might look across the room at someone who has been in the group for 6 months.
Right.
They hear that 6 months ago that person was also paralyzed. But today, they are speaking up confidently, setting boundaries, and re-engaging with life. Watching someone else improve provides visceral, undeniable proof that change is possible.
It's contagious. If they can do it, maybe I can do it.
Exactly.
But the factor that I find the most counterintuitive, yet brilliant, is altruism. Because you go to therapy to be the patient, right? You go to get help, to receive care. But Yalom argues that the act of giving help is profoundly therapeutic.
It is deeply therapeutic, especially for individuals whose self-esteem is just decimated. When you are suffering, you often feel like a burden to everyone around you. You feel useless.
Yeah.
But in the working stage of a group, members actively support and challenge each other. When a member offers an insight or simply offers deep empathy, and they see that their contribution visibly helped another person in the room, it restores their sense of value.
It completely shifts their self-concept. They realize, I am not just a broken patient receiving treatment. I possess the capacity to heal others.
Exactly. It reminds them of their own strength and utility.
And finally, we have to look at interpersonal learning. We touched on this with the here and now concept, but essentially, the group becomes a safe interpersonal laboratory.
Right. If you have a terrible temper that is destroying your real-world relationships, you can't easily practice fixing it out in the real world, because if you blow up at your boss, you're fired.
The stakes are too high.
But in the group laboratory, you can test out new ways of handling frustration. If you fail and raise your voice, the group won't fire you and they won't abandon you. They will point out the process, give you feedback on how your anger impacted them, and let you try again.
You are learning how to relate to others by actually relating to others in real time, receiving immediate, honest feedback on your blind spots.
The working stage is where the insights gained in therapy are translated into actual behavioral changes. It's not just about understanding why you push people away. It's about practicing the act of letting people in.
But as deep, transformative, and cohesive as this working stage is, the group is a temporary laboratory.
It has to be.
It is not a permanent home, nor should it be. The work must eventually conclude. And how a group ends, how an individual leaves, is incredibly diagnostic of how they handle loss in their wider lives.
Oh, absolutely.
This brings us to the final chapters of our blueprint. The final stage, which Corey calls consolidation and termination, and the post-group follow-up.
It is vital to understand that termination isn't just an administrative wrap-up. It's not just checking a box, handing out a survey, and saying, okay, our 8 weeks are up, good luck.
Right.
Termination is a crucial, distinct therapeutic phase of its own, with specific clinical tasks.
I noticed in both Corey and Yalom's texts that a massive amount of weight is placed on this ending phase. The leader has to actively help the group deal with feelings of separation and sadness. They have to review the specific changes each member has made, consolidating the learning.
Right, cementing it.
And they have to prepare the members to transfer these new skills out of the safe laboratory and into the unpredictable, often hostile outside world. Ending a single session is one thing, but ending the entire group process is fraught with psychological landmines.
The psychology of endings is intensely complex. Yalom's offers a very deep perspective here, linking termination to our core existential fears.
Existential fears.
Yeah, he notes that the ending of a deeply connected group evokes our deepest fears of mortality, of separation, and of abandonment. It is a stark reminder that everything is finite.
Wow.
Because of this existential dread, members, and very often therapists themselves, will try to avoid the reality of the ending.
So rather than facing the sadness, they just want to pretend it's not happening. They want to brush past it. See you later, no big deal.
Exactly. But Yolom insists that therapists must never collude in the denial of termination. The ending must be faced head-on, discussed openly, and processed emotionally over several sessions.
And if it isn't?
If the leader lets the group just drift apart without acknowledging the loss, members leave with unresolved feelings. They miss a critical opportunity to learn how to process grief and separation in a healthy, supported way.
The substance abuse text we pulled from actually classifies departing clients into 3 distinct types based on how they handle termination. And I thought this was a brilliant framework.
It's very practical.
First, you have the completers. These are the individuals who did the work, reached their treatment goals, and are genuinely ready to graduate and move on. Then you have the plateauers. Their progress has slowed down or stopped. They've absorbed what they can from the group for now, and it's time to take a break or try a different modality.
And then there is the third, most problematic category.
The fleers.
The fleers. These are the people who are escaping rapidly because they hit an uncomfortable emotional reality.
Hey, they get too close to the fire.
Right. The anxiety spikes, the intimacy becomes too threatening, and they bolt. They drop out prematurely to avoid the work.
Which is precisely why the initial group agreement often includes a strict stipulation that if a member wants to leave the group before it officially concludes, they must come back for one final session to announce it to the group.
Oh, that's interesting.
They have to give the group a chance to process the departure and give themselves a chance to hear feedback. It prevents the flight response from happening in the shadows. That leads to a question I was turning over in my mind while reading this. Why is it so vital to do this formally? Let's say a member reaches week 10 of a 15-week group and thinks, you know what, I feel better, I got what I needed, I don't want to deal with the heavy goodbye stuff.
Right.
Why can't they just send an email to the therapist, say thanks for everything, and stop showing up? Why force this formal emotional goodbye?
Well, it comes back to how poorly we function in our everyday lives when it comes to endings. Society does not model healthy endings for us.
That is so true.
When relationships end, when jobs end, when friendships drift, we usually lack the emotional tools to deal with the separation effectively. So what do? We rely on defense mechanisms, we ghost people, we fade away into silence.
Ghosting is basically the modern default for avoiding the discomfort of an ending.
Exactly. Or, very commonly, we pick a massive fight. We manufacture conflict to justify leaving. We focus on everything the other person did wrong, because being angry and resentful is much easier to tolerate than being profoundly sad and vulnerable.
So we pick a fight to avoid the grief of leaving.
Yes.
But isn't that ultimately more damaging to the individual? They leave the group with a reinforced belief that relationships always end in hostility or abandonment, rather than learning to sit with the discomfort of a healthy goodbye.
You've hit the nail on the head. That is exactly why the therapist cannot allow them to just slip away. The group forces a different dynamic. It demands a healthy, dignified, and conscious goodbye.
It forces closure.
It forces the members to look each other in the eye, acknowledge the reality of the impact they had on one another, express their sadness without running away, and leave with their heads held high, knowing the relationship was valuable even though it is ending. For many people, a successful process group termination is the very first healthy ending they have ever experienced in their entire lives.
A healthy ending as a therapeutic intervention in itself, that completely changes how you view saying goodbye. But the blueprint doesn't technically end the moment they walk out the door. Corey includes one final critical stage. Stage 6, the post-group issues and evaluation.
Yes, the follow-up is the final piece of the architectural puzzle. This typically involves evaluation sessions, either individual interviews with the therapist or a final group reunion a few months later.
What's the goal there?
The purpose here is accountability and assessment. It allows the therapist to evaluate the outcomes of the group. Did the intervention actually work long-term? And it checks if the members have successfully applied their in-group learning to their daily lives.
It's the ultimate test of the crucible. Did the metal actually harden into a new shape, or did it melt right back into its old dysfunctional patterns the moment it left the heat of the group?
The follow-up holds them to the contracts they made with themselves during the termination phase. It reminds them that the work continues long after the group officially disbands.
So what does this all mean? We have journeyed through the entire architectural life cycle of human change today. We started with the meticulous, harm-reducing screening of the pre-group phase. We watched the anxious boundary testing and the curation of the public image in the initial stage.
And then the storm.
Yes. We weathered the fiery, necessary transitions of the storm, navigating power struggles, resistance, and the complex masks of transference. We saw how surviving that storm unlocks the deeply cohesive working stage, where the here and now process and factors like universality and altruism drive real behavioral change. And finally, we explored the bittersweet existential necessity of the final stage, learning how to override our instinct to flee and instead say a dignified goodbye.
It is a predictable, highly structured pathway, but within that structure, the most profound and volatile aspects of the human experience are playing out. We see our deep need for inclusion, our fear of dominance, our capacity to heal each other through shared vulnerability, and our ultimate dread of separation.
And that leaves you, the listener, with something really important to chew on as you go about your week. We've talked about this entirely within the context of intentional clinical therapy groups. We've seen how they must go through these intense, predictable stages, the blueprint, the storm, the engine, the goodbye, to achieve deep trust and actual change.
But these stages apply everywhere.
Exactly. So think about the groups in your own life right now, your family, your workplace team, your closest friend group. If you put on those psychological X-ray glasses and look at the invisible gears, what stage are you actually in?
It's a great question to ask.
Are you experiencing genuine cohesion, dealing with issues in the here and now? Or, and be honest, has your group been stuck in the transition stage's struggle for control, endlessly arguing about who does the dishes for years? Are you constantly avoiding the storm just to maintain a polite public image, or are you finally ready to face it?
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of connection. Begin questioning the dynamics around you.